Alright, we are back. It's been a while since I did a YouTube video. So for this video, we're going to talk about the different astrological transits happening in the month of October, focusing on how they affect all of us as a collective, trying to include some individual information, like if you have a sun sign that's in air, or earth, or water, etc., what that could mean for you. And I apologize if my breathing gets annoying. I have a bruised rib, so it's kind of hard for me to breathe. So if I am like that, that's why. So where to begin? First things first, Venus went retrograde today in Scorpio, and so we're going to be dealing with Venus and Scorpio energy a lot throughout the next couple months in ways that we usually don't every year, because Venus usually spends about 2 or 3 weeks in energy. So for it to be experience, I don't know the exact amount of time that it's going to be in Scorpio, but it's going to be, actually we can find out. It's going to be in Scorpio basically for the rest of this month, and then we'll be experiencing more Venus in Scorpio near the end of November. So December we'll be experiencing this again. So this is something that we'll be exploring long-term wise. If you're familiar with my Instagram astrological forecasts, just a minute long each day, but that's going to cover a lot of the little nuances of, okay, what does this transit mean for this particular day? So if you're interested in that, I really recommend you check that out. But otherwise, this energy combined with Jupiter in Scorpio is a really good clearing out, purifying energy. Scorpio, especially Venus and Jupiter and Scorpio together, those are energies of finding at the core what works for us as individuals, what works for our relationships, what doesn't work for us as individuals, what doesn't work for our relationships, what we need to let go of, or more specifically, who we need to let go of to be able to grow, to be able to transform ourselves, to transform our lives. And for some of us, that is going to be that drastic. There will be relationships that break up during this time. Marriage, stuff that seemed really solid, all of a sudden will disintegrate. Now, I don't wish to cause any alarm for anybody who's experiencing good relationships, because good relationships will only get better during this time. Now, there will be challenges, but ultimately, what is a good relationship? Two individuals who are predisposed energetically to be able to give and receive love and attention and affection and share their emotions and be vulnerable with each other and share what they really think with each other. And it naturally, not always, but more often than not, it ends up working out for both individuals. It ends up feeding the relationship. It ends up building the connection, instead of finding out, for example, oh, you think that, and all of a sudden, oh, that's not really compatible with what I think, and it's not a petty belief. That's something that's really important to me. I have to really rethink all of this. I have to refeel this, or this isn't going to work. Goodbye. That is what's going to be happening during this time, is we're going to be exploring the depths of feeling and of thought, especially since we have Sun in Libra for the vast majority of this month. And we have Mercury in Libra right now, and then Mercury won't be in Libra for very long, but another week or so, that's when Mercury will move on into Scorpio. But regardless, the focus on our thoughts and our feelings and how we relate to others or how we don't relate to others is going to be a huge theme during this time. It's really wise to avoid the mistake of trying to get with past lovers during this time. Venus retrograde, especially in Scorpio, could lead to a nostalgia, a feeling of, oh man, I miss that great sex, or I miss that great emotional connection that we had. Or maybe it's possible, not to say that it's not possible, but with these transits, it's more likely for it to be nostalgia, and for it to not be quite as real as you think it might be. Especially with Neptune and Pisces, we have that trine, and trine energies are said to be really beneficial aspects in astrology, but as with everything in astrology, every energy, as every aspect, has its beautiful gifts and its challenges. And the challenge of a trine is to get a little bit too carried away with things, for things to progress too quickly. And in this case, nostalgia over relationships is definitely the theme, focusing on all the good stuff and ignoring the bad. And then all of a sudden you get back into that relationship, just hypothetically, and it tears you apart even more so than the first time. That's the kind of energies that we're dealing with, especially with the square of Mars and Aquarius. We'll get to that in a little bit. But even just Venus in Scorpio retrograde and Jupiter in Scorpio, this this is the time where we have to learn. Okay, we don't have to, but those of us who aren't learning, then we have to learn the hard way. This is a time of learning in our relationships, and over the big scope of our lives, this is a really beneficial time to be able to understand, again, what works, what doesn't work, what we need versus what we don't need. This is a time where a lot of people will get caught up in lust and get caught up in stuff that seems to give us power, seems to give us emotional sustenance, but actually it has no emotional substance. So this is a time that's really useful, but in the long term, but in the short term it can be really difficult. And of course, with that Mars in Aquarius square Venus Scorpio and Jupiter Scorpio, and then when Mercury goes into Scorpio in about a week or so, this is a time where a lot of people are going to be pushing the limit in not necessarily a good way. A lot of violent deaths are going to occur during this time, and that's largely, I don't wish to generalize, but that's largely going to happen because certain individuals get caught up in old behavioral patterns, old emotions, old cycles, and it leads them to become erratic, expressing that Mars and Aquarius energy, and to lash out in violent words, and then those violent words then brush up against somebody else who's wrapped up in the Venus and Scorpio retrograde, and then that person just, typical belligerent, violent, lack of thought is more primal. It's more you said what? Boom. It's definitely an understatement. But in any case, it's going to be a clash whereas if we had maybe Mars in Pisces or Mars in Cap or something like that, that kind of people acting out their emotions, acting out their negativity might be swept under the rug if it was Pisces, or dealt with in some kind of constructive manner in Capricorn. There's always the potential for violence, but especially during this time right now with two energies that are square each other, it's very likely for that Mars in Aquarius to act out, and or that Venus and either way, really, that Venus and Scorpio to act out, and then for them to meet a very unpleasant end, and or even meet death. This is a very intense time that we're living through, and so it's good to keep in mind this. If you are keeping your cool, and this applies really for any time, but especially during a time like this, if you're keeping your cool, if you're just seeking to live a good life and to be honest with other people and to try not to hurt them, and if you're being hurt to again, I don't wish to generalize because that can mean so many different things if you're being hurt, but basically to handle your anger, your frustration, your sadness, your depression in a constructive way, to not lose hope, to not feel like this is it, my life is just going to be this particular suffering for the rest of my life. That's never true. It's never true if we are taking it upon ourselves to grow, to be able to free ourselves from any kind of sick relationship. And with these energies, we have a beautiful opportunity. That's the best part of Venus Scorpio and Jupiter Scorpio for that matter, but especially Venus and it being retrograde, is to just finally figure out, okay, this is a sick relationship. I need to move forward. I can't be a part of this, because the kind of violence that happens during this time, and actually statistically overall, is usually people that are emotionally impulsive about somebody that they care about, that they love. And so it's really important to recognize your feelings and to sublimate them, to find positive outlets for them, and also to recognize that violence is never going to solve anything. In fact, it's just going to lead to a really unhappy end for everybody involved, whether it's jail or death or whatever it may be. It's really important to understand that you have the freedom to free yourself from any kind of sick emotional relationship and to be able to find your way on your own. That can be a little bit difficult to understand, or rather embrace, or consciously stay rooted in that truth, because we have this Sun and Mercury in Libra transit, and even when Mercury moves on, Sun in Libra does tend to get a little bit too preoccupied with connections with others. And with that Scorpio energy, there can be during this time, we have to, if we're going to free ourselves from negative emotional cycles, we have to recognize what power we're giving up. We have to recognize when it's better to just walk away. instead of having anything to do with somebody that is not in our best interest or who's hurting us, consciously, subconsciously, what have you. At a certain point, we just have to say no. Honestly, it's as simple as that. Now, of course, is it as it's much easier said than done because our emotions run so deep. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what energies you have. Take it from me. I study the energies all the time, and I've done this professionally for over a half decade now. We are always able to understand our emotions if we take the time to sit with them and to work through them and to understand what emotions are worth feeding and which ones are worth letting go. Um, to be able to let go of challenging emotions, and that's one of the best options, the best opportunities that the current time has to offer us. We have to be able to go inward. A lot of people have difficulty with this just because their temperament is a little bit more outward when it comes to their emotions. They like acting out, but this is, especially if you're getting burned at this time, or rather, it's more like an electrical shock because of that Mars and Aquarius energy. It's a really That's a really good sign. It's time to go inwards and to figure out, okay, what is happening inside me? Why do I feel the way I do? And to let nothing escape your conscious awareness. To allow yourself to feel all of the anger, the sadness. You have to delve into the pool. You can't dip your toes in to your emotions. Now, whether that means you do it all at once or maybe you don't jump into the pool, maybe it's a little bit too much, maybe this is too much trauma to handle, maybe you go one step at a time, that's perfectly fine. Whatever is best for you, that's something that you need to figure out for yourself. But it is essential that we explore the pool of our unconscious. I always liken it to an ocean. The ocean, sunken palaces at the bottom of our sea. When we just hit that, when you hit rock bottom, right? That's when you finally start to look around and go, oh, shit, okay, this is what I've been avoiding. This is what I've been scared by. I have to go through these sunken palaces, or, fellow Zelda fans, these dungeons. I have to go through these dungeons of my psyche and sort through them and understand them and better myself and transform myself. That's not easy to do. It takes time. It takes a commitment, but it's way easier to do that in the scheme of our entire lives than to not do it and to be owned by our unconscious actions. To have shit happen that we put into motion, but we don't really understand why or how we put into motion. And so we have regret, or we shield ourselves from our own consequences, our own responsibilities in creating those consequences. This is very common for our conscious mind to do if we are seeking to avoid something scary or painful, or to avoid our own power and being able to change our lives. We tend to say, that person came up and swung me, and they hit me in the face. It's like, yeah, that happened, but what happened before then? Oh, well, I called them a name. It's like, you have to face what you are feeding the situation, or you're just going to keep experiencing suffering. So it's up to you, as always. It's always up to you. Whether you want to feed the positive in your life or feed the negative, if you don't explore your unconscious mind, if you don't explore your subconscious, and it's a perennial quest for understanding. It's never a cool, I understand myself, because we're continuing to grow, you see. So even though our childhood, it is what it is. The past is what it is. So we can explore that ad nauseum through a variety of different methods, from therapy to meditation to hypnotherapy to, even past life regression can be very interesting and very helpful in that regard. From a psychological as well as an esoteric perspectives for this life and previous lifetimes and whatnot. It's essential to explore what's going on behind the scenes. And at this time, it's the perfect time to understand ourselves and to explore ourselves, and also to explore other people and to explore society in general, because Mars is in Aquarius. So Venus in Scorpio energy is much more centered around the self and others. It can focus on the collective, but it's more of an instinctual. It tends to come back more towards the self. It's good to look at Taurus, the partner energy, to see that it's more focused on a one-on-one relationship, me and you, or just me in this case, or whatever. Both, really. So that Scorpio energy is focused in that regard. Mars in Aquarius is focused on me and we, us, all of us, and society, seen from male to female, male male, female female, non-binary, whatever. It's focused on the mass collective. And that's something else that's really interesting that's going to be coming up during this time, is the relation of male to female. This has been a very interesting year for cleaning out the closets of very, very sick patriarchal themes, as per toxic masculine themes, of understanding who has been a sexual predator, and to understand on a bigger perspective what behaviors have fed into these hierarchies of power that have been very sick and very dominated by behaviors that have been aggressive and even assaulting. It's been an interesting, sometimes eye-opening, sometimes sometimes sickening time to see, okay, what the fuck has been going on behind the scenes for the last decades, and also what do we do to change that for the future. So being that Jupiter is going to be in Scorpio just for about another month until November 8th, and being that we have this Venus retrograde transit, it's very interesting that we have these transits together, because this is the final hurrah of Jupiter Scorpio. And this isn't to say that sex scandals or scandals in general won't come up to the foreground, but whenever Jupiter Scorpio happens, and it happens for a year every 12 years, when we're at the very tail end of this year cycle, that is when the dirty laundry comes out. So that's a good lesson. It's not just about this year acting toward what's the word, having behavior that's psychologically healthy and beneficial towards yourself and others, even when the lights are off, even when the camera is off you, even when the darkness is around and it seems like you could get away with it. That is not the case. And it's really beautiful that this has happened, because this sets a precedent even over the next 12 years until the next Jupiter Scorpio transit, that we've gotten a little bit more, actually a lot more aware of what happens behind closed doors. But of course, we have to, so it's good to look at the collective, of course, but we have to come back to, especially during this month, we have to come back to the individual, where each one of us is, and just trying to find the different trends in our relationships that affect us the most. I mean, of course, we can be affected by what's going on in society, but it's up to us to not look at other people and go, oh, shame, shame, this is so sick, I demonize that person. Even if we disapprove of that behavior, we should definitely speak out against it, for sure, especially in these cases. Yeah, but we have to understand the shadow within us. We have to understand the unconscious within us. And that does not justify that behavior. That does not excuse that behavior. But it helps to explain it. Instead of demonizing women, for example, this is just one example of how this could play out. But instead of, in some cases, women demonizing men as, oh, they're just pigs. You know, we're just obsessed with sex. And instead of men demonizing that side of us that, I mean, it's not even about gender. It's not even about, it doesn't even go along strictly gender lines, but because we all have the shadow, we all could exhibit that kind of behavior. But regardless, being that there is something biologically and I think sociologically in the realm of human history that has, socioeconomically, that has led to men usually being the aggressor and that kind of predatory behavior, we all have to look within and understand our shadow, and understand that if we aren't conscious of what's going on, of what we truly need, and the difference between need and want within, then we can exhibit, if not that exact mode of terrible behavior in the form of sexual assault, still very lamentable, negative psychological. I mean, this could play out in addiction, could play out in just being mean. It can. There's so many. There's such a huge array of negative psychologically based. I mean, ultimately, all of our actions are psychologically based. There's such a huge spectrum of what could go wrong, in a sense, of what, if we're not psychologically together and exploring, always open to explore, how we can act out and hurt others. So this is a time where the potential of acting out and hurting others and then being hurt in return is very likely. But instead of playing the victim, instead of trying to pretend like it was their fault completely and that you had nothing to do with it, and by the way, I don't wish to imply any kind of parallel between what I just said and victims of sexual assault. That's not at all. That is a false implication that I feel some might perceive. That's not at all what I'm saying. I just mean to say that no matter who we are, we have the potential for shadow behavior, and it's essential that we explore our shadow behavior, our potential for shadow behavior, whether it's violence, whether it's any kind of assault, any kind of negative manifestation of our daily quest for fulfilling our needs, and from a broader human perspective, fulfilling our idealism, fulfilling our goals, our dreams. We have to examine how we interact with others. And certainly cry foul when others hurt ourselves or other people. But never getting caught up in the idea of us versus them. Oh, I could never do that. It's not so simple, because the unconscious mind and our primal biological programming is capable of truly terrible things if we don't check ourselves. So in short, this is a month of checking ourselves. This is a month of coming to understand ourselves and how we interact with others to a greater degree, and ultimately how others act is up to them. The consequences will be on them. Let karma take care of it. Karma is that cause and effect. They're putting negativity out, they're going to receive negativity. Just like I was saying before, this is a time where it's like instant karma, instant negativity. Somebody says even an innocuous word, another person will come back because that kind of negativity will breed, or rather attract and breed that kind of negativity, and bam, punched in the face, shot in the head. I mean, this is a very instant thing. So being that the stakes are so high, especially during this time, take it easy, chill. Don't get wild with your emotions, your actions. Seek to understand what your relationships are doing well, which ones you need to let go of, and how to be more in tune with yourself, so that you don't have to suffer and you don't pass along suffering to other people. It's really hard to be that break in the chain of suffering, but it's one of the most worthwhile things that we could possibly do, not only for others, but most importantly in many ways. I mean, most importantly for others as well in some ways. But ultimately, it's your life, it's your journey, and if you stop passing along the suffering, that means that you are not going to suffer anymore. And again, it's tough. It takes a lot of different methods. Sometimes you need help. We all do. In the form of a therapist, in the form of even if things are going good, in the form of somebody to help make sure things continue to keep going good, so that no subconscious fears or pains or vindictiveness overcomes the goodness, the success, and leads to a negative outcome. So it's an intense month, but it's a very important month. I mean, they're all important, but this is a time where we can really come to understand ourselves better and understand how to treat others and how not to treat others. So, yeah, infinite love to you, my friend. Namaste.